Hello, everyone. Welcome to English Insights. Today, we will talk about a very important event in history, a key battle in the Pacific that led to the official entry of the United States into combat in World War II. It is the attack on Pearl Harbor. This happened on December 7th, 1941. It was a surprise attack by the Japanese military. The attack took place at a U.S. naval base in Hawaii. This battle was a major turning point in World War II. It changed the war and the role of the United States in the world. In this lesson, we will tell the story of the attack. We will look at what was happening before the attack. We will see why Japan decided to attack. We will also describe what happened that day and what came after. This video will help you practice listening and reading. You will learn new English words and understand more about a very important day in history. Part 1. The situation before the attack. To understand the attack on Pearl Harbor, we must look at the time before 1941. In the 1930s, Japan was a country that wanted to expand its power. Japan's military was growing. It wanted to control more land in Asia. Japan invaded China. It also took control of French Indochina, which is now Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. This expansion worried the United States and other countries. The U.S. did not want Japan to take over more land. The United States and Japan had different goals. Japan needed natural resources. It needed oil, rubber, and steel for its industries and military. Many of these resources came from other countries, including the U.S. The U.S. did not like Japan's military actions, so the U.S. put a stop to its exports. In July 1941, the U.S. stopped selling oil to Japan. The U.S. also froze Japan's money in American banks. This was a very serious problem for Japan. It had only enough oil for about 18 months. Japan's military needed oil to run its ships and airplanes. This situation created a big problem. Japan could not continue its war without oil. The Japanese leaders had two choices. They could stop their expansion in Asia, or they could find a new source of oil. They decided to find a new source. The countries in Southeast Asia had a lot of oil and other resources. Japan wanted to take these countries. But if Japan did this, it knew the U.S. would fight back. The U.S. had a powerful navy. The U.S. Pacific Fleet was located at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. It was a big threat to Japan's plans. Japan's military leaders believed they could not win a long war against the U.S. They thought the U.S. had too many factories. The U.S. could make more ships and more planes than Japan. So, they decided to strike first. Their plan was to attack the U.S. fleet at Pearl Harbor. They wanted to destroy the ships. This would give Japan time. It would allow them to take control of the countries in Southeast Asia. They thought the U.S. would not be able to fight a war without its navy. They hoped the U.S. would agree to a peace treaty after a short war. This was the reason for the attack. It was a military strategy to remove a big obstacle. The U.S. and Japan tried to talk about their problems. Their diplomats met many times, but the talks did not go well. Japan did not want to stop its expansion. The U.S. did not want to sell oil to Japan. Both sides could not agree. The talks ended in November 1941. The Japanese government secretly decided to attack. The attack was planned to be a surprise. Part 2. Japan's Secret Plan. The Japanese military spent many months planning the attack on Pearl Harbor. The plan was a secret. Only a few people knew about it. The leader of the plan was Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. He was the commander of the Japanese fleet. He knew that Japan could not defeat the U.S. in a long war. So, he thought a surprise attack was the best way to start. He wanted to destroy the U.S. Navy. This would allow Japan to take control of the Pacific Ocean. The plan was very complex. It had to be a secret. The Japanese military had to move a lot of ships across the ocean. They had to do it without being seen. They had to travel a long distance. Pearl Harbor is in Hawaii. Hawaii is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It is far from Japan. The Japanese fleet for the attack included many ships. There were 6 aircraft carriers. An aircraft carrier is a big ship. It is like a floating airport. It can carry many airplanes. The airplanes take off from the ship and land on the ship. These carriers were the most important part of the plan. They carried the airplanes that would make the attack. The Japanese fleet also included other ships. There were battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. These ships were there to protect the carriers. The fleet also had submarines. The submarines were there to sink any U.S. ships that tried to escape the harbor. The Japanese pilots practiced the attack for a long time. They practiced dropping bombs and torpedoes. A torpedo is a weapon that travels underwater. They practiced in a bay in Japan that was similar to Pearl Harbor. They wanted to be ready for the real attack. They wanted to make sure they could hit their targets. Their targets were the U.S. battleships. A battleship is a very large warship. It has big guns. The U.S. had 8 battleships at Pearl Harbor. The Japanese wanted to sink all of them. The attack plan had 2 main waves. A wave is a group of airplanes that fly to the target. The first wave would attack the battleships and airfields. The second wave would attack other ships and buildings. The goal was to cause as much damage as possible. The Japanese government planned to send a message to the U.S. government. This message would say that the diplomatic talks were over. The message would be sent just before the attack. The attack was scheduled for Sunday, December 7th, 1941. Sunday was a good day for the attack. Many American sailors were on shore leave. The harbor was calm. The attack would be a complete surprise. Part 3. The morning of December 7th, 1941. The morning of December 7th, 1941, was a quiet day in Hawaii. It was a Sunday morning. The sun was shining. The weather was nice. Many U.S. sailors were sleeping on their ships. Many other sailors were on shore. They were enjoying their day off. The U.S. military was not on a full alert. They did not expect an attack. They believed an attack was not possible. They thought the Japanese would attack somewhere in Asia, not in Hawaii. At the naval base, the U.S. Pacific Fleet was at peace. Many ships were docked together. The battleships were lined up in an area called Battleship Row. This was a row of battleships. It made them an easy target. The planes at the airfields were also lined up. They were placed close together. This was done to protect them from people who might want to damage them, but it made them an easy target for an air attack. The planes were not ready to fly. Their ammunition was not loaded. On the Japanese ships, the pilots were getting ready. The aircraft carriers were about 200 miles north of Pearl Harbor. The planes were being prepared. They had bombs and torpedoes. The pilots received their final orders. The first wave of 183 airplanes took off from the carriers. They flew south toward Pearl Harbor. The pilots did not talk on their radios. This was to keep the attack a secret. The American military did not see the fleet. They did not know the planes were coming. There were some signs of a possible attack. An American radar station saw the planes. Radar is a machine that sees things in the sky. The radar operator saw many planes coming. He called his commander. The commander thought the planes were American planes. The planes were supposed to come from another island that day. So the commander told the radar operator not to worry. The warning was ignored. Later, a U.S. ship saw a Japanese submarine. The U.S. ship sank the submarine. This was about an hour before the attack. The message about the submarine was also not sent to the right people. These warnings were missed. The attack remained a surprise. Part 4. The first wave of the attack. The first wave of Japanese airplanes arrived at Pearl Harbor at 7:55 a.m. They flew low over the harbor. The American sailors were surprised. They did not know what was happening. At first, some people thought it was a practice drill. But then, the planes started to drop bombs. The planes started to fire their machine guns. The attack had begun. The first wave of planes had different jobs. Some planes were dive bombers. A dive bomber flies high in the sky. Then, it dives down very fast. It drops its bomb on the target. Other planes were torpedo bombers. A torpedo bomber flies low over the water. It drops torpedoes into the water. The torpedoes travel under the water and hit the ships. Other planes were fighter planes. Their job was to shoot down any American planes that tried to take off. The fighter planes also shot at the people on the ground. The main target was Battleship Row. The Japanese planes wanted to destroy the battleships. They dropped bombs and torpedoes. The torpedoes were very effective. They hit the battleships under the water. This caused a lot of damage. One battleship, the USS Arizona, was hit by a bomb. The bomb went through the deck of the ship. It hit the ammunition room. The ship exploded in a huge fire. The explosion killed more than 1,100 sailors. The ship sank very quickly. It sank in about 9 minutes. The USS Arizona is still at the bottom of Pearl Harbor. It is a memorial today. Other battleships were also hit. The USS Oklahoma was hit by many torpedoes. It turned over and sank. The USS West Virginia was hit by torpedoes and bombs. It sank at its dock. The USS California and the USS Maryland were also hit. The USS Nevada tried to leave the harbor. It was hit by bombs. The captain decided to run the ship aground. He did this to prevent it from sinking in the channel. Sinking in the channel would have blocked other ships. The attack was very fast and very effective. The American military was not ready. The planes on the airfields were destroyed. The American anti-aircraft guns started to fire, but it was too late. The first wave of planes had done its damage. Part 5. The second wave and the response. The first wave of Japanese planes finished its attack. The second wave started its attack at about 8:40 a.m. This wave had 171 airplanes. The second wave's job was to destroy the remaining ships. It was also to destroy other important targets at the base. The targets included shipyards, dry docks, and other ships. They also attacked the airfields again. The goal was to make sure the U.S. fleet could not fight back. The American military was more ready for the second wave. They were in a state of chaos, but they were fighting back. The anti-aircraft guns were firing. American sailors were shooting back with machine guns. Some American planes tried to take off. They fought the Japanese planes, but there were not many American planes left. Most of them were destroyed on the ground. The destruction of the planes on the ground was a big problem. It meant the U.S. had no air protection. The second wave caused more damage. The USS Pennsylvania was hit by a bomb. It was in a dry dock. A dry dock is a place where ships can be repaired. A destroyer, the USS Cassine, was also hit. It fell over in the dry dock. The USS Shaw exploded after being hit by a bomb. The ship was still in the harbor. The fire from the explosion was very large. The attack ended at about 9:45 a.m. The Japanese planes flew back to their carriers. The attack was over. It was a huge success for the Japanese military. But the Japanese military leaders made a mistake. They did not attack the oil tanks at Pearl Harbor. The oil tanks held a lot of oil. Without this oil, the U.S. Pacific Fleet could not have moved. They also did not attack the repair facilities. These facilities were important for fixing the ships. The U.S. was able to use these facilities to repair many of the damaged ships. The attack caused a lot of damage. But it could have been worse. The Japanese also did not find the U.S. aircraft carriers. The U.S. had 3 aircraft carriers in the Pacific Ocean. They were not at Pearl Harbor on December 7th. They were away on a mission. This was a very lucky thing for the U.S. The carriers would be very important later in the war. Part 6. The Aftermath and U.S. Response. The attack on Pearl Harbor was over. The harbor was a scene of destruction. Ships were on fire. Smoke was everywhere. The water was filled with oil and debris. The American military started to help the injured. They started to rescue people from the water. Many sailors were trapped inside the ships that had sunk. It was a very sad and chaotic day. The numbers were very high. More than 2,400 Americans were killed. About 1,100 people were wounded. Most of the people who died were sailors. Many civilians also died in the attack. The attack also destroyed or damaged many ships. 8 battleships were damaged. 4 of them sank. 3 light cruisers and 3 destroyers were also damaged or sunk. A total of 18 ships were damaged or destroyed. The attack also destroyed about 188 airplanes. Another 159 airplanes were damaged. This was a huge loss for the U.S. military. The news of the attack spread very fast. People in the United States were shocked. They could not believe it had happened. They were very angry. They wanted to fight back. Before the attack, many Americans did not want to join the war. The attack on Pearl Harbor changed their minds. It made them united. It gave them a reason to fight. President Franklin D. Roosevelt spoke to the U.S. Congress on December 8, 1941. He gave a famous speech. He called December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. He asked Congress to declare war on Japan. Congress voted to declare war. The vote was almost unanimous. This officially brought the United States into World War II. Germany and Italy also declared war on the U.S. a few days later. The war had become a true world war. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a big tactical success for Japan. But it was a huge strategic mistake. It united the American people. It made them determined to win the war. It turned a neutral country into a powerful enemy. The U.S. would go on to build many more ships and planes. The U.S. industrial power would be the key to winning the war. Part 7. The Historical Debate and Legacy. The attack on Pearl Harbor is a very important event in history. It is a story that has been told many times. There is some historical debate about the attack. Some people ask if the U.S. could have been more prepared. They ask why the warnings were ignored. They ask if the U.S. government knew about the attack. Most historians say the U.S. government did not know. They say it was a real surprise. The U.S. was not expecting an attack on its home territory. The warnings were missed due to mistakes and bad communication. It was not a conspiracy. The lack of preparation was a result of a mistaken belief that Japan would not attack so far from its own country. The legacy of the attack is very clear. First, it brought the United States into World War II. The U.S. became a key member of the Allies. The U.S. military and industrial power were essential to defeating Germany and Japan. The war might have ended differently without the U.S. in it. The attack on Pearl Harbor was the reason the U.S. joined the fight. Second, the attack changed the nature of warfare. It showed that aircraft carriers were the most important ships in a navy. Battleships were powerful, but they were vulnerable to airplanes. The U.S. learned this lesson. It started building many more aircraft carriers. The war in the Pacific would be fought with carriers, not battleships. Third, the attack on Pearl Harbor changed the United States. It ended the period of isolationism. Isolationism is the idea that a country should stay out of other countries' problems. The U.S. had followed this idea for a long time. The attack showed that the U.S. was not safe from global conflicts. The U.S. became a world leader after the war. This new role as a world leader continues today. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a shocking event. It was a tragic day for many people. But it was also a turning point. It was the start of a new era for the United States and the world.